ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ So last time we began value of values, and we left off at the subtopic of universal values, which is the source and function. So let's hear the Dhyana shlokas, and then we'll begin with that.
बोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे फुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयः प्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दुग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनम् देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुम् भीष्मद्रोणतट जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोत्पला शल्यग्राहवती कृपेण वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोत्तीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैरणनदी कैवर्तकः केशवः पाराशर्यवचः सरोजममलम् गीतार्थगन्धोत्कटम् नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधनाबोधितम् लोके सज्जन षट्पदैरहरः पेपीयमानं मुदा भूयाद्भारतपङ्कजं कलिमलं प्रध्वंसिनः श्रेयसे मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम् यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति ज्ञानावस्थितेन मनसा शन्ति योगिनो
यस्यान्तं न विदुः
पुरा
सुरासुरगणाः देवास्मै नमः.
Okay, so here's where we left off the last time. So I guess a few new people have joined, so I can just like add them down to the order list. Okay. So does anyone want to summarize what we went over last time? Or does anyone recall? So we began basically the text, and we completed the last couple of verses from the Dhyana Shloka. And then, just as a brief recap, the value of values, Pujya Swamiji takes chapter 13, verses 7 to 11. So there are 5 verses from this chapter. May I request like everyone to just mute their mics in case they're not talking? There's a lot of background disturbance actually. So, um, yeah, please familiarize yourself with the mute button. Karishma ji,
Yes.
yeah, please. Thank you.
Okay.
So,
Pranav.
no, I meant like whenever you're not speaking, like please keep the mic muted.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, thanks. So we went over what the jnanam means in this context, and over here, Pujya Swamiji doesn't call jnanam as like in the terms of knowledge, but he refers to it as values. So these 20 jnanams or these 20 values which are presented in these 5 verses are very helpful to any aspirant for assimilating this knowledge because, as Pujya Swamiji said, for any kind of knowledge to take place, you require a prepared mind. So, for example, if there's a student who wishes to learn calculus, then the least that is expected of you is that you know what 5 plus 4 is, right? So you cannot not know basic addition and subtraction and then expect to learn a more detailed subject like calculus. So similarly, for something that's of direct perception, for instance, if I want knowledge of the sky, that the sky is blue, and I just like glimpse at it, I don't require preparation for that. The knowledge is very direct, and there's no prepared mind that's required for many things, such as I hear a sound, I hear a branch falling, I hear the leaves rustling. So for that, I don't require prior knowledge. It's just a direct sensory perception, and I have knowledge of that particular phenomena in nature. But for any detailed subject, and this applies for anything, not just Vedanta, but for any subject, you require a prepared student for it. So, and then he talks about knowledge. Three factors are required. First is a knower, the object of knowledge, and the means of knowledge. These three things have to be present. So here the knower would be, for instance, if you just put in the example, you have an individual, then you have an object of knowledge, which is a tree, and then you have a means of knowledge, which are the eyes. So you require these three things in order for knowledge of the tree to take place. Um, and of course, the mind must back the sense organs. So a classic example I always use, and something I can relate to, is if you were in your school or college days and you were attending a lecture and the sound input was entering your ears, but yet nothing was getting registered. So sometimes you have to pay attention to what is being said or what is being heard or what is being seen in order for it to register and to be stored in the form of knowledge. So the mind has to be behind the sense organs. Antakarana has to be there to back the sense organs in order for this thing to really be observed. So that is something that's very important. And we already touched upon this, that the mind must be prepared. So, you know, as he says over here, if your mathematics background is shaky, you can't even add, you probably are not prepared for calculus. Similarly, even Vedanta requires some special conditioning prior to assimilating this knowledge. So, Aham Brahmasmi may sound like a very relatively simple thing to understand, but the mind requires preparation. It requires Antakarana Shuddhi. It requires to assimilate certain values in order for this knowledge to really reveal itself to you. So, that is one thing we talked about, and the words as a means of knowledge. So over here we talked about the means of knowledge, and we discussed this in detail during our Tattvabodha sessions. But just as a recap, you have Pratyaksha Pramana, which is the direct sensory perception. You have Anumana, which is inference. You have arthapati, which is presumption based on some very sound inferences. Then you have anupalabdhi, which is knowledge through the absence of something. So it's basically, if I say that I am not holding a pot, then the non-cognition of the pot implies that there is no pot in my hand. So there are three things that are taking place, right? First is that you hear my statement. The second thing is that you visualize a pot in your mind, and then your cognition does not support that visualization of the pot, and therefore you conclude that there is no pot. So this is knowledge to the absence of something. And then you have uh, um, knowledge through comparison. So for a classic example here is that Pujya Swamiji says, if you have lived in India for your whole life, for your entire life, and you know how a buffalo looks, and now somebody says that in USA you'll find an animal called a bison, and then you inquire that how will I be able to know that this is a bison? And therefore you take two things that you're aware of. So you take a buffalo, which is one thing that you already know. Then you take a lot of hair, which is another thing. When you say that there's a buffalo, it looks like a buffalo, but it's very hairy. There's a lot of hair like hanging out from its sides. And so next time you go to US and you see this bison, then you will be able to recognize it through this kind of a comparison. So anyway, these are some of the means of knowledge that we use. And but what means can you use for knowledge of the self, for knowledge of dharma, swarga, some of the rituals that we perform and so on. So for that you require Vedanta or Vedas in general. And again, I guess this is a moot point about whether Veda is a pramana or Vedanta is a pramana. But here, as Pujya Samji says, with what we are concerned with is Vedanta is a pramana, Shabda pramana. And this pramana is what reveals the knowledge of the self to us in the form of words. So that's why it's called a Shabda pramana. And of course, here the jnanam, as in the values, prepares the mind for Vedanta, which we spoke about a couple of times. And so, this is a very important statement that was made last time. When appropriate values are present, self-knowledge may or may not be present. When appropriate values are present, self-knowledge can be gained. And when appropriate values are absent, self-knowledge cannot be gained. So this is something to really reflect upon if you take a few seconds. So any doubts on what we covered last time? Otherwise, we can just proceed with today. Okay, I guess then we can just start. Krishma ji, please go ahead.
Yes. Hari Om once again, everyone. Universal values, source and function. What is a value? Value indicates the regard for a thing, situation, or attitude which for some reason is esteemed or prized by the value holder. The appropriate values which prepare the mind for Vedanta are certain universal ethical attitudes. In Sanskrit, an ethical value can be defined as dharma. Dharma is a standard or norm of conduct derived from the way in which I wish others to view or treat me. The dharmic mandates for behavior and attitude were commonly found in religious scriptures, in fact trace their source to pragmatic common sense ethic, which religious ethic confirm. In other words, my norm for what is proper behavior or a good behavior is based on the way I wish others to treat or view me. What I expect or want from others becomes my standard for dharma, right behavior. What I do not want others to do is adharma, wrong behavior. Should I continue?
Yeah, please. You can read this.
I want others to speak truth to me. I do not want others to lie to me. Truth speaking is dharma for me. Non-truth speaking is adharma for me. Scriptures confirm truth speaking as good behavior. Scriptures condemn non-truth speaking as bad behavior.
Yeah, you
Should
can
I
just
proceed?
just conclude up to this section, then we can start.
Okay. Our behavior norms, such as non-injury, humility, charitableness, are all based upon the same consideration of how I would like others to treat me. Thus, ethical norms are not just arbitrary, man-made rules, but stem from an inherent common regard for one's own interest and comfort. Ethical standards are natural and universal. There may be some cultural variations in degree or emphasis, but the basic standards have a certain universality.
Yeah, it's very beautiful. So, and it basically says do unto others as you would want them to do to you. And a lot of our civilizational laws, if you see, like I think every culture in the world would condemn stealing, right? Nobody would say that stealing is right or lying is right or any of these things which we commonly condemn. And the reason for this is because everybody has a universal value for it. It's not something that needs to be indoctrinated into you, but it's just a common sense fact that if I don't want somebody to steal from me, then I should not also steal from somebody else because they would still have the same reaction as I do, which is a very negative reaction. So, it is considered homicide, for instance, right? Killing another person is considered universally wrong because you know that if I do not wish to be killed and if my family suffers for, then I should not be killing somebody else either. And then that passes when the majority preference is taken into consideration, and then it becomes a law. But then, as we'll see ahead in what Pujya Swamiji talks about ahimsa, there are some things which we would expect to be universalized, such as like not killing animals, for instance. And those are not norms just because, think about it this way. If I can speak up for myself, I can say that no, I do not wish to be killed, I do not wish to be hurt, and then you can empathize with another human being. But then you cannot do the same with another animal because the animal has no way of really revealing this truth to people, and so they are taken as lesser life forms in a sense. So actually, Pujya Swamiji touches upon those points as well, that there are many things which might be adharmic, but then they don't have a universal value appeal. But still, there are some of the things which we should abide by. So it's really beautiful.
Yeah, I agree to this, Prashant. And what I also feel is, there are some values which an individual imposes on themselves. So definitely, human beings are given a rational mind. I guess that is what sets us apart from animals, and that is why we can have the inner consciousness to really see what is right and wrong, or see the difference between dharma and adharma. So I guess, yeah, there are universal values. There might be some differences in cultural values also, but there are some, individual values which one sets for themselves.
Very true. Very true. And yeah, on a slightly hilarious note, I was listening to Pujya Swamiji's Viveka Chudamani lectures yesterday, and he said that there's a conflict in human beings only while they're doing three things. And this was not meant to be taken super seriously, but he's like, first is when you do something illegal, there's a conflict in your mind. Second is when you do something that's immoral, there's a conflict in your mind, right? So something that's illegal may not necessarily be immoral, and that we've only observed very often in our lives. And third is when you eat foods rich in fat, because you see they taste really good, but you know that's not really very good for you if you have it in excess. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah. Challenging? No, wait, actually,
Next,
Soumya
that's me.
yeah.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah. Okay. Ethical values, universal in content, relative in application. Universality of codes of applicable conduct, that is, of general ethical standards, does not mean that these standards are absolute. Dharmas and adharmas are relative. There are situations where what is considered ethical becomes unethical, depending upon context. That a standard may be relative does not mean that it is purely subjective. Although relative sometimes in applicability, basic ethical standards have a universal content. There is a similarity in everyone's reaction to being hurt, cheated, lied to, and bullied. Ethical standards are based on a human consensus regarding what is the acceptable conduct. This consensus is not negated by the fact that the norms may be subject to interpretation in some situations. Even such a pronounced, clear value as non-injury to myself is modified by some circumstances when I willingly submit to surgeon's knife. Such a suspension of my value for non-injury to myself is situational and does not affect my basic value for non-injury to myself or its extensions, my general value for non-injury to all beings. Although my norms or values for behavior and attitude themselves may not be subjective, my interpretation of these values is very likely to be highly subjective. My values are universal in content, but relative and situational in my application of them. For example, I am likely to apply a value for truthfulness very consistently and absolutely to the words of the others. To my own words, my application will be much less consistent and quite relative to the situation. In general practice, I will apply values more consistently and more absolutely to the others than to myself. After all, the source of my value is found in the way in which I want others to treat me, which becomes my norm for good behavior. I find it easy to have others observe ethical standards so that I can be beneficially. It seems less easy for me to be consistent in the application of these standards to my own behavior. It's sometimes so true, right?
Very true. We
We
always expect
expect,
the best of others, but we don't
yeah, I
present the
know.
best of ourselves to others.
Yeah. And I think very few people recognize that they don't give the best.
Yeah,
That becomes more problem to even make them understand that it is not the best.
very true. And I also recall hearing in some talk now, I don't know who gave the talk actually, but with a cultivation of Arpana Buddhi, which is like, whatever actions we perform, we dedicate it to Ishvara. As
Mm,
one becomes more and more refined in that attitude, you cannot help but present the best to Ishvara because you don't want to give anything less than that. You have so
mm,
much devotion, so much love for Ishvara that you whatever you give will only be your best. So whether it is your contribution at work or it is your contribution to your family or just to anything that you do, you will always uh, do it with a feeling of gratitude and with a very with the best that you have in you.
mm,
So that definitely helps. That if I'm like for instance if somebody is using like bad language, ultimately whatever you do with Ishvara is the karma phala data. Eventually all the fruits of karma come back to you, but in order for your own fruits to come back to you, first an offering has to be made. So people should think twice before doing any bad action in life. Whether they say something bad, they do something bad, they think something bad, whatever you do is dedicated to Ishvara. It all becomes part of this grand system,
mm,
and it comes back to you when the time is right. So that just the thought, and it's not a fear-inducing thought, but it's just a thought of compassion and love, like towards Bhagavan. That why should I give you anything less than I have? Why should
yeah.
I not present my best to you? Why should I not be a better person so that I can only present to you what is like the superior sort of action? So
Mm. And also these values, as mentioned earlier, they're very situational, right? I mean, uh, example, the surgeon's knife when you undergo operations or medical conditions. I mean, that time you do hurt yourself, but then it is again for the good of you, not bad for you.
yes. So, a lot of people mistranslate, and this again comes back to the value of ahimsa. But a lot of people mistranslate what ahimsa means, and ahimsa is not the principle of non-injury, rather it's the principle of least injury. So the least harm that is caused. So the least harm in effect translates to the greatest good. So, as you pointed out, that if I have to undergo surgery, definitely there will be some blood that's spilled, and definitely there will be some cuts and sutures that are made. But ultimately, it's for my own good, and it's for the good of the greater dharma over here. So sometimes, and many times, you'll come across these situations in life when you have to violate a lesser dharma in order to uphold a greater dharma. One example
Hmm.
we see is in Mahabharata, right? When Yudhishthira had to say that he had to lie kind of. He
Yeah,
had to say a lie
yeah.
to
Ashwatthama,
Dronacharya.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that I don't
Ashwatthama.
know if it's the elephant or the human, but it accomplished what needed to be accomplished at that time.
Hmm.
Similarly, if you see a lot of people, you will not believe this, but I guess I'll tell you, the Jain version of Mahabharata is very different. So, of course,
Okay.
we know that the Vedika Sanatana Dharma is probably the oldest form of philosophy and teaching that we have in the world. But a lot of other religions developed on top of it, and some of the ideals were borrowed, and some of the principles were also borrowed. Like, for example, ahimsa. It occurs in the Mahabharata, ahimsa paramo dharmaha. And of course, that is like the cornerstone of the Jaina philosophy. Similarly, there are many things that we accept which have taken some form in their teachings, though it's very different. So, for example, when we talk about karma, even Jains accept karma. All I would say dharmic traditions, all Indic traditions accept more or less the same principles and values that we do, like aparigraha and asteya and brahmacharyam, and all of these things are accepted universally as far as India is concerned in terms of Indian philosophy, barring the Charvaka school of thought and maybe a couple of others, but in general. So, according to Jains, they don't see this ahimsa as like the greatest good. Rather, they see it as complete, distance from like injury. Like it's a paripurna ahimsa for them. So they believe that because Krishna goaded Arjuna into lying on the battlefield, and like for example, he created the false eclipse to fool people
Hmm.
that it's nighttime or the sun has
Yeah.
set.
Hmm.
They believe that he incurred papam for that and that he's in hell. I mean, that
Oh.
is that is actually part of the philosophy, and of course, this is something that has become so deeply crystallized in their teaching that this is something that I myself have studied their teaching for a couple of years, and I've heard this from many of their gurus that Krishna is currently in hell. He is suffering for I don't know how many crores of years because he lied on the battlefield, and so they have these versions, and so one would think that dharma is so contextual even across its understanding as far as its understanding goes across the philosophies, but it shouldn't be that way because here we know that what is the greatest good is you don't short sight yourself, you don't take things into like a short term perspective, but you also have to look at the long term perspective, that what are the consequences of a particular action or a particular course of actions that I have to take, and what is it going to accomplish. Do I have any ulterior motives here, or is it for the greater good of society and the world as a whole? So, it becomes kind of a second nature to you as you go about this thought process. But a lot of people are myopic in their vision. They only want to see what is like of instant benefit. So, I was just not introducing politics too much, but I was talking to Unnati the other day, and Aam
Hmm.
Aadmi Party is promising free water. And as a
Hmm.
student of engineering and also economics, there's one principle that I learned, which is there's no such thing as a free lunch. You have these business meetings where they say, oh, lunch is free. There's no free lunch. Somebody is incurring the cost. And there
Yeah.
might be some benefit that is gained by you going to that event and them offering you the free lunch, but somebody is carrying the cost. So as you would expect, taxes have risen by a few percentages points in Delhi, and that more or less is what is going to fund the
Compensates.
free.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but people are so stupid, and I shouldn't say that, but people want freebies. They want everything to be immediately free, and they want these false promises. But they don't want to inquire that where is this being produced from? If you
Yeah.
promise free electricity, who is incurring the cost? If you promise free water, who is incurring the cost? Eventually, the cost is going to come back from your pockets. But rather than instantly paying it through one bill, you're going to be bleeding it over time through taxes. So anyway, these are some things that one has to consider whenever one makes a decision, and whenever one accepts a decision made on your behalf. You have to always inquire like what is the greater consequence and what are the far-reaching effects of this particular set of actions. So sorry, I digressed a lot.
No, that's okay. It's the same thing. Just if I'm add to it, we have this, 1 rupee rice per kg of rice and all coming up. It's
Mhm.
like a subsidy for the ration card holders on a below the poverty line. But I think somewhere it doesn't do good to them either. It doesn't good do to anybody in the society for that matter.
Yes.
1 rupee rice, 1 rupee sugar. I mean, it just doesn't make sense
Yeah, it doesn't.
because,
In
and
fact,
that, yeah. Tell, go ahead.
You know what the Congress government did? They wanted to portray a very good fiscal budget and stuff a couple of years back, and they wanted to show that see in our rule, like poverty and all went down. So what they actually did was there's a certain poverty threshold that beyond that income level you're considered poor, and then you go into the statistics as poor. What they did was they lowered the poverty line. And so now superficially in your papers, it appears as though there are fewer poor people and that we have been a very good government. So this is the thing that you can actually, if you understand a little bit of statistics, it is the best tool to lie to people. A person who's mastered statistics is like the most greatest of I mean, I'm a statistician myself. I love statistics, but it can also be misused very badly. That's what I'm saying. The subject itself is beautiful. There's so much you can understand about the world, but yeah, it can be misused a lot. So and anyway, the point is that here the greater dharma has to be preserved. So of course we know that Krishna Bhagavan as an avatar, as we accept, did not go to hell for these lives, because there was a greater good to be accomplished here, which is the protection of dharma. And if the Kauravas came into power, then there would be chaos for many generations to come. Whereas, the dharma here was to have a righteous king and a righteous rule for many, many years. So, yeah.
Yeah, one more example, Prashanti. It's Draupadi's example is also for dharma. I mean, marrying 5 husbands is very unethical, and it's adharma for normal women. But for Draupadi, it is considered as most dharmic work done ever, because she sacrificed that for the society and for the people of the kingdom. So that's why we worship her as Pratasmarniya Devis. But
Yes.
Otherwise, it is not considered ethical or dharmic for normal women. You cannot do it for the selfish reason. You have to have a bigger reason for doing something like that.
Absolutely agree. In fact, a lot of criticism I hear, especially coming, I'm going to go really political today, coming from the feminists. There are many
I know.
internet feminists I
I
know.
completely agree with that, and that is
Okay.
why I brought this topic here, because people like, oh my God, we hear so much, and people argue about this thing so much that they don't understand. I mean, it's a trauma. I mean, considering one abuse creates so much drama, and for her to take that decision, I mean, imagine what kind of situation, what kind of hell she went through to take that decision.
Yes.
It wasn't easy. It's just not just like a story. Okay, she married 5 husbands. No, it was. I mean, if it is for me, I could have been like, oh my God, I cannot do that. It's hell. But she took that decision just for the people.
Yes. In fact, just some context to that story, since you brought up, it's a very good thing. After Arjuna like returned home with Draupadi, that the contest had taken place, right? He had to shoot the image
Yes.
of the fish in the eye by looking at the reflection. So anyway, he won the Swayamvara, and Draupadi chose Arjuna. So Arjuna brings her home to his mother Kunti, and he's like, "Look, mom, see who I got home." And as usual, Kunti ji was like, "Oh, that's very." She didn't see; she just heard him, and she said, "Oh, whatever you got, please share it with all your brothers also." So here Arjuna and Draupadi were probably they dropped their jaw for a few seconds, but eventually it was Mata Agnya. You were like following the instructions of your mother, and then you don't question it. So we see a similar thing in the Ramayana, right? Where Ram Bhagwan could easily have said that Dashrath ji, my father, you have lost your mind. You are actually in this, you're confused. Like, give it another thought. But he
Exactly.
never argued back. He never even
Exactly.
had ill will towards Kaikai. In fact, Bharata, Kaikai's biological son, was very traumatized by the situation, and he was very rude to her. He
Right.
almost disowned his mother, and Ram said, "See, please, she's our mother, and we have to, respect her. We have to uh, uh, carry forward with their wishes." So,
Yeah, I
in
mean,
fact,
I was like, I get so mad that the people always like victimize them, like, oh, Draupadi was a victim or Sita was victim. No, they never said they were victim of anything. They accepted that situation and moved on, and they handled that situation. That is why we consider them as Devi or superwomen. I mean, people always, if they get into that kind of situation, they always portray as victim of it, or this is what happened to me, and cry. No, for me, I mean, I consider Sita as very modern women. I mean, nowadays people say, oh, that's a single woman, single mother, she's taking care of kids. Look at her. She was a princess. She was most beautiful woman on the earth, married to, we consider, Bhagwan. So she's like equally capable, like Ram. She's not just an ordinary woman. She took her own decisions. Going to one was her own decision. Nobody forced her to do that. And
Yes.
she took responsibility of her decisions. It's not like, okay, I did that, but now I'm not taking the ownership of my act.
Yes.
So for me, she was very modern woman. She's very modern. But
Absolutely.
for concept of modern is now only Western. If you are Western, you are modern. That I don't like. It's very hard for me to digest that concept.
No, no, I agree with you. That's a false equalization that is being made, that modernization equals westernization. Now, if you can see the screen where I opened up, there's a cartoon.
Hmm.
I don't know if I don't know whether to call it a cartoon or not, but it's animated. And it is created by this white feminist lady. And in this whole, there's parts in the cartoon where they show that the Sita is pregnant and Ram is jumping on her stomach with his
Oh
feet.
my God.
He's like stomping on her stomach, and this whole cartoon shows what a villain Ram is and how Sita had to suffer. And this is like Sita sings the blues, so Sita sings a sorrowful tale. And this won so many awards. It won like awards in USA, it won awards in Europe. And these are the things that these stupid feminist ladies are passing as our tradition.
That
So
is what it is like. So like I feel bad. Like, I mean, you have to, if I mean, for me, like, if you are a superwoman, you have to know how to handle the situation.
yes,
And these ladies handled their like worst
look at
situation
this.
in
Look
a
at
good
this.
way.
The guy beating Sita, right?
Oh my God.
And now you see this guy Dhobi, the Dhobi who's accusing her, and they're showing a laundry room. This is how they made fun of our Ramayana.
Scriptures,
This
yes,
is the
yes.
Tide, right? You remember the Tide detergent? So I mean, they've kind
Yeah,
of like made it look like that, and see, it's basically everybody's just like insulting Sita, and they're throwing things at her, they're throwing clothes at her, and now they show like over here Sita's.
you're right. I mean,
I
I
mean,
feel like
I
we
know
did
this is
so
a
much.
digression, but I see. So here she's pregnant, and I think
Oh
somebody's
my,
going to like beat her up here or something. And this is disgusting to look at because I'm just
exactly.
surprised that people, and it is by this Nina Paley, whatever her name is.
Yeah,
And
I mean, these people did most injustice to Sita and Draupadi. I don't know why, but
yeah,
we are responsible for that.
and a million views, if
Yes,
that's not much. In fact, if these things release, they will get like the highest views, and the stupid intellectuals in our country, Bollywood people, the media,
yeah.
they'll all glorify it. They'll say, oh, this is there's a rendition of the Ramayana in South India. I think one politician who was also a writer made it. Over there, not Raman, sorry. Yeah, I think Raman, where they show Ravan as the hero and Ram as the villain. Then there was one Muslim scholar, and I was talking to Unnati the other day, where there was a debate with Rajiv Malhotra or whatever, and there was not a debate; it was a discussion panel. I wished it was a debate so that he would have been destroyed completely, but he said basically that Ram and Lakshman were like horrible people, and then they cut off the nose of Surpankha simply because she flirted with her. And I wanted to like literally scream out in my seat that no, that is a misinterpretation of the story. In fact, you lying. It's a downright lie.
Exactly.
Surpankha was not only flirting with, okay, so first she flirted with Rama, and Ram said that, see, I'm already married, but he was like joking around. So he's like, but my brother is single, so you can go after him if you like. He was joking basically. So Surpankha is going towards Lakshman, and he's like, no, 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 no. My job is to protect my brother and his wife, and that is my role here. So I'm sorry, I'm not interested. So then Surpankha gets really mad, and she says that it's all because of this wretched Sita that you guys are rejecting me, and therefore now I'm going to eat her up. And so she jumps to attack her, and that is when Lakshman cuts off her nose because she's attacking Sita. This is totally left off in the story. They say that, see, you guys are so anti-women that if a woman tries to kind of like step forward and kind of flirt, then you'll cut her nose off. So this is how a patriarchal society you are. Anyway, I've heard so much nonsense of this. I can like go on and on, but I'm sorry I'm digressing here. But we can come back to this now. Who's next? Sundarji.
Hari Om, yeah.
Interesting discussion. It is pretty enlightening, and also it's very good. One request, Prashantji, can you lock the screen so when others are talking, I can see that your screen
Oh,
disappears.
sorry. I should have done that earlier. Is that better?
Yeah, much better. So we are on the ethical values, right? Yeah. Ethical values cannot be dismissed. Can I safely dismiss a concern for values? No. I cannot escape from values because nobody living in this world can escape relationships. Based on his concern that he may not hurt or disturb. He may not be hurt or disturbed. From this comes an accepted canon in the criminal code. Do not be an informer. The inescapability of the impact of values can be seen by considering a hitman. A veteran hitman, a merciless killer, does not want to be hit himself. He cannot escape the value for non-injury. He can only defy it, which creates conflict even in an internal insensitized mind. Value cannot be dismissed, nor can they be defined with impunity. Failure to meet a value puts me in conflict with myself. When I perform an action, what is a non-value? When I perform an action that is a non-value to me, I create a seed of guilt, which is all that is needed to produce sleeplessness, fear, and conflict. Even small lies create problems, like lies sometimes told regarding one's age. Truth about age may seem simple, unimportant thing, but small things register inside as conflicts. Very true. Yeah, back to you.
Would you like to have any discussions around this?
What happens?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Sorry. What happens to people who are like suicide bombers? Like they don't have anything to, stop them from killing or putting themselves into hurt. So how do we fit them into this?
Well, can I?
Yeah,
Even
please.
before we go to suicide bombing, especially what he's saying here is, let us say, I mean, why should we not lie, right? Because I see that people who lie can get away with a lot of things, and they seem to be more successful in life than people who are very straightforward and truthful. Isn't that the case?
Yes,
So,
often.
Right.
so why on earth would somebody put themselves through all this misery and tell the truth? Because truth always gets you into trouble. The reason is, let us say I say something. Let's say I'm coming to your house. You call me for some function, and I say I'm going to come. But inside I know that I have different engagement, and at the last moment I can lie to you saying kuch ho gaya. So when I do this, I myself know that I'm lying. So my action and my words are in conflict with each other. There is a variance, and the more number of variance you have, internally you lose respect for yourself. So you already know that you're going to tell a lie, and you stop taking your own words seriously, right? And the more and more you do this, your personality changes to become a chronic liar. And when you start doing this, your spiritual, I mean, because your words carry no value of themselves. Spiritually, you're degrading yourself. So it's like a soil. So a farmer has to till it before some seeds are laid, and you're hardening the soil by telling all these lies. The more variance your mind has, there are multiple versions that has to be maintained in the mind, and at some point you'll be confused as to what is truth and what is false. And the entire idea of a sadhaka is to go towards the one truth, right? And if you yourself are not following that one, even your own truth, forget the one universal truth, but your own truth, you don't respect it, then you become unfit to become a sadhaka. That's my take on this. Sorry, back to your suicide bomber.
Very beautifully said. This is, in fact, Swami Paramatmananji also alludes to this, right? During his Upasana Yoga, where he says that you have to bring about integrity in your thoughts, in your speech, and your actions. And as Sundarji very well pointed out, that This makes you a very conflicted person, a conflicted personality, and such a person is not a good sadhaka.
True. So sorry, your question about the other one, the suicide bombing. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I context of in terms of lying, but what happens when a killer, like a criminal, like what happens in his mind? Because later, after doing a crime, he doesn't go through any guilt. Like, so where are the values gone then?
So if I can address this, I can give you two examples. One is this is not of a suicide bomber, but this is of a bomber. So during the Hiroshima Nagasaki bomb attacks, atom bomb attacks, the first bomb that was ever dropped was dropped by a pilot, and he thought he's dropping a regular bomb, like a TNT based bomb or some kind of a simple explosive. And when he dropped it, and when he looked down at the enormous destruction, he couldn't take it. He actually went into mental breakdown, and he needed like psychotherapy for many years. He did not know the result of what he had done. He did not know that this was an atom bomb and this was the magnitude of destruction. He just knew that's a new type of prototype we are testing. So sometimes you do something with a particular, you believe that this is going to be the intensity of my action, and then it ends up being very great. It can overwhelm you. So that definitely leads to a conflict, and sometimes it can also lead to a mental breakdown completely. In the case of a suicide bomber, now this is a very interesting question, and it's a very conflicting question also, because everybody values their life. Nobody is stupid enough to say that I don't wish to live. In fact, Pujya Swamiji says that even a person, everybody wishes to live. There are three things that you want in life. First is you seek to live. Second is you seek to be happy, and you also seek to know. And I will come back to the same statement I made, and I'll tie it back in the end. But these are three things to remember. One is you seek to live happily, and you seek to know. Now, a person, when they wish to end their life, that means one of the conditions is not being fulfilled at all, and which is that I am not happy, and therefore they believe that they want to still exist, but they want to put an end to this particular existence where the happiness is bereft completely. So nobody in their right mind would want to kill themselves or end their life when their life is happy. Right now, a suicide bomber may, in a way, like for example, when we saw the Boston bomb blast recently, during a race in Boston last year, there was a bomb blast, and the person who planted the bomb, he was an intelligent guy. And many of these people who are suicide bombers are engineers. Some of them are even like scientists. So I think even during the 9/11 attack, some of the people, they had a college background at least, so they were intelligent. They were not like completely stupid. But the promises of the hereafter that are presented or what they are indoctrinated into is a lot more appealing than the present form of life. So for example, if somebody promises you 72 virgins when you go to heaven, and then you have these spoils of Swarga, so-called their version of Swarga, then somehow that becomes a very attractive thing. And if you feel that my action is going to bring me that very amazing consequence in the future, then you are willing to do something that violates even a basic life essence, which is I want to put an end to my life here so that I can enjoy the hereafter. Nobody is going to kill themselves unless they are looking for something better to come, so they have a greater value for what is to come rather than what is already existing. Another reason a person can be impelled to do such a thing is under threat. So there have been many murder cases where, especially during the mafia era, during the 1930s, there was a mayor in Chicago. His name was Al Capone, and a lot of crime was taking place under his nose. And eventually, they realized that he was the kingpin. He was the gang leader. He was actually the head, honcho of the mafia operation. So he never really got implicated for any of these things, but he would always get other people to do it by having their family threatened, so that there's a threat that if you don't do this for me, then I will kill your family. So in many cases, there's always a conflict of value. If I put an end to my life right now, it's because I have a greater value for a life that is to come. But no, unless this indoctrination is not there, nobody would ever, in their right mind, think of putting an end to their life. So that conflict is overseeded by another greater value, and it's all a question of values ultimately.
Yeah.
So you can do something wrong under threat. You can do like there's some coercion or there's some promise of a greater good in the future. But this is what we would call delusion, right? Because usually At least this is how I define it in my own understanding. You have an objective reality that's out there in the world. The world works according to certain laws. And then there's a subjective understanding of the world and of myself and all, which is there in my mind. The closer my subjective reality and my subjective understanding is to the objective world out there, the more I can term myself as sane. And a person whose subjectivity completely overshoots its objectivity, then you can see that the person's insane. For example, you hear voices and then you have delusions of grandeur. So a lot of these things take place. So usually it's either a mental condition, it's either like a forced threat, or it's a greater value that you'll have for something else. But ultimately, usually in the cases of like suicide bombing and so on, it's always that you're looking out for a greater value. So that's how I would put it, unless somebody else has a different input. But sorry, coming back to the original statement I made, that there are three things that you want in life. You want to live, you want to be happy, and you want to know. And Pujya Swamiji says, you are what you seek. So the fact that I say I want to live, I am existence, Sat. The fact that I want to know, I am the knowledge principle, Chit, Jnanam. And the fact that I want to be happy, I am Purnatvam, I am fullness, I am Anandam. I am free of all limitations. So Anantam, Anandam is covered here as well. So it is your nature, and therefore all you're trying to do is return back to that nature, because anything that is against it is a conflict.
Yeah. So I guess it's the value which one person holds in his mind, which overpowers the universal or ethical values.
Yes. And the value may also be born of delusion. It may not be necessarily true, but it's still a
Yeah.
projection that they have in their subjective mind, and it's something that they projected as a reality, and therefore it becomes. So, let's say, just take an example, right? Somebody says that if you do something, okay, for example, if you cheat on an exam, then you naturally know there is a sense of guilt that, oh, what if I get caught? Oh my God, I know this is wrong, but still, if your sense of value for passing the exam is greater than your sense of value for violating that code of conduct. So whenever one value oversees another value, it impels you to do a certain action. And that's why it's very important to have a good value structure. And that dharma, viveka also has to be there. Like one has to know what is a value and what is not a value. So Pujya Swamiji says the real appreciation comes when I have a value for the values. If I don't have a value for the value, it's not a value for me. I have to value my values.
Yes. Okay, can we go ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's me. Are values only mithya apparent? To those who have had a little exposure to the teaching of Vedanta, it may occur that norm-breaking behavior, that is bad behavior, may be dismissed because it is only mithya, apparent, not absolutely real. To such an argument, it can be said, if you can dismiss all good acts and all good things as mithya, apparent, then fine. You certainly also may dismiss bad acts and bad things as well. When I can see good and bad equally as mithya, values are not a problem for me. In the clear knowledge of what is real and what is apparent, my actions in the relative world cannot but be spontaneously good, because I have nothing to gain, nothing to protect. It is that clear knowledge of self which I am seeking, which my mind must be prepared with proper values. In a mind filled with conflicts, because values are dismissed or defied, nothing will happen when I listen to the teacher of Vedanta. True.
This is what Sundarji was alluding to earlier, that if your mind is with conflicts and if you have like these multiple personalities all beating at you from inside, and if you lie, then you have to protect that lie, and there's one person who knows the lie, there's another person who knows the truth inside you, and then you have to always make sure that you speak the you have to pass the lie as the truth. So usually if you see, it's very easy to tell the truth, right? It doesn't require too much, it's very spontaneous. But when you say a lie, that is when your brain gets into this overdrive mode, because there are many things going on and there's a lot of conflict also going inside. And the truth is very straight, it's a straight path, and here in a lie, you like kind of like you're going through curved paths, and you're kind of like you're basically trying to manipulate the situation. You're trying to manipulate somebody else's mind. So why create such complications in your life? When your mind is conflicted, these values will never assimilate well. There's recently a good a quote of Pujya Swamiji I read where he said that the bhogi tries to manipulate the world for happiness. The yogi tries to manipulate the mind for happiness, and the rogi is helpless because he cannot manipulate anything. But if you are well steeped in the knowledge of the self, then you realize that as Pujya Swamiji said over here, right? Values are also mithya. It is fine. But when you have that dharma viveka, and when you also have the nitya anitya vastu viveka, then everything becomes very straightforward to you because you realize that I have nothing to gain. I am full, I am Purnam, and therefore the right thing, the straight path becomes a very meaningful or rather very natural expression for you. It is only when you have to do something wrong, when you have to go out of your way to plan and to plot and to manipulate and to kind of like, have the situation in your favor. But when you're doing something right, it is a very straight path. And the straight path is the path without any conflicts, without any hurdles. So that's why, if you see for a wise man, dharma is not something that he chooses to do. It is a very natural thing. It is not a choice that he makes at all. But in order to be wise, you also have to live a life of dharma eventually, because only a dharmic lifestyle is going to give you the right sort of prepared mind for the knowledge to become meaningful to you. So coming to values and conflict. Okay, so let's read this. Values and conflict. No one wants a mind in conflict. A mind in conflict is not a desirable mind. Once conflicts are there, problems of the mind are unavoidable. Self-condemnation, regret, a guilt, a sense of failure are the products of mental conflict. Conflicts come when I'm unable to live up to a particular value which consciously or unconsciously I accept. Societal norms have a universal content, the influence of which I cannot really escape. My inherent desire to be comfortable and secure compels me to set standards for the behavior of others, establishing a common sense ethical code which bounces back on my head. Religion codifying society's ethical consensus into rigid tables of do's and don'ts make conformity on my part even more difficult. When I cannot live up to my value structure, I am in conflict and suffer guilt. Ashwini ji, do you want to read?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, you can read this.
Okay. Then I will read. Dropping out does not solve conflict. The dropout behavior of the hippie generation prevalent during the 60s in the West largely seems to have been an attempt to escape conflicts. During the Vietnam War period, the clash of unassimilated traditional values with situational personal values was particularly acute for young people. The response of many was an attempt to make no values their basic value. Traditional values were condemned and a lifestyle based on individuality, self-expression and spontaneity was proclaimed in their state. This did not work. Few values led to conflict, but as we saw before, values cannot simply be dropped. The universal content of values can be negated only if I have no concern for how the other person treats me. If I want other people to behave in a certain manner, I am struck with a value system.
Very true. So just, I guess this is a little digression, but an interesting fact is that I think a lot of people know about the hippie generation. So you had two generations. You had the beatnik generation, and then you had the hippie generation. So this was sometime during the era of the Beatles and a little after that. So it especially kicked off in the mid 60s, and during and it peaked during the early 70s. So that was wherein this hippie movement really peaked. And if you see people wearing these colorful t-shirts and long hair and these like big and round sunglasses and just having a bandana on their head. So this is like the hippie generation that was there. And during the I'm a fan of tracing back his history and seeing how like culture evolved over time. And if you see that, up to the 1950s and 1940s, 30s, and so on, even if you watch like American movies at that point, they were very straightforward. Like, there was kind of like very crisp dialogue and well directed and cut and all. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that there was a generic style in like British movies and American movies and so on. You could not very easily tell a difference even in accents. In fact, the American accent back then was extremely different from what we hear today. Even that has changed. But then once the 60s and the 70s kicked off, you had a completely different era where there was a lot of independence. Like people broke free from family structure. Many of them quit their jobs and then they became musicians. They started forming bands in their basement. They started experimenting with different sorts of drugs. Some of them went to this neo form of spirituality, which of course we don't accept, but a lot of Hindu acharyas came to the US and they settled, and a lot of people were acquainted with yoga, and just a very warped form of Hinduism was prevalent over here. So 70s were a prolific era for like music, for filmmaking, for arts, for literature. It was a very like fertile era. But what happened was it was at the cost of responsibilities. It was at the cost of business. So the 80s had to bear the brunt of the hippie behavior of the 70s. And therefore, US went to a big depression in the 80s because 10 years maybe there was like a buffer when it could tolerate this economic impact, but then it really went into a downstream. So, one has to be accountable, one has to take responsibility for their lifestyles. I plan to interview this individual called Dr. Lata Shenava, and as part of a Dharmic Samvada initiative, I want to interview people who are close and acquainted with Pujya Swamiji and who are very accomplished in a certain field. Whether it could be a sannyasi, it could be an accomplished musician of Carnatic music, whoever. So I just want to create this dialogue. And she has done tremendous research in family as a unit, and she talks about how this individualistic scheme of family in the West is actually destructive, and how our Indic family system, where we have joint families, where we like live together, where everybody shares responsibilities and duties and lives coherently, is a very healthy thing even for children as they grow up. So this value structure used to be there to an extent in the US during the 50s and 60s. But then after a point, these days, if there are people who, if you say that, okay, you're living with your parents, then they come up with many conclusions. First is, oh, you probably don't have enough money to move out. Is that why? Or, are they like requiring your help or something? Or like, it's their first reaction is to find out if something's wrong, that what is wrong that you're living with your parents. And this reaction is very common. You will not believe, there was a case, I believe, in Sweden or Norway or one of these Scandinavian countries, and a child was taken away by the government from an Indian home, like from an Indian, like two Indian parents. And do you know the reason why the child was taken away by the authorities? Because the mother gave a crocin tablet to the child when the child had fever. Just like think about that for a second. The government took away the child and they did not let the parents see the child again because the mother gave crocin. Because usually in India, we believe in this like self remedy and so on. And the parents are not allowed to see the child again. Another reason they started calling all these Western psychologists to justify this takeaway. And you know what reason they came up with? When the fact that the child and his sister and the two parents used to live together, and many times the child used to sleep in the parents' room when the child was like 9 or 10 years old, and they found that very abnormal, because according to the West you should have your own room and you should not be sleeping with your parents at that age. And they came up with all these Western psychological justifications about how abnormal this family is and how they deserve to take the child away. They came up with another reason that the child that was 3 years old, the mother used to feed him with her spoon, that here, take this food. And they said that, why are you feeding the child this way? After 2 or 3, the child can pick up their own food. You should not be forcing the child. This is abuse. This is like, abusing a child. So the Western standards are so messed up with regards to like family structure, and somehow they also imposed upon India. And I was also having this discussion the other day where Rajiv Malhotra posted that in India, this whole norm of breastfeeding is also on the decline, because somehow the West finds it like very stupid. And then they are pushing like this bottle feeding into India, and now Indians have also become kind of like modernized that way. And again, I don't particularly have that kind of opinion because I'm not very educated on this. So therefore, I asked my wife for more information, because she's studied human development and early childhood care, and like she's very accomplished in the field. So she told me about all the research that she has come across, and so the point I'm really trying to make over here, and I guess it's a digression, but the fact is that Western values, and this is something Shalini ji touched upon earlier, when we talk about modernization, when we talk about progression of society from the past to the present to the future, somehow we've learned to equate modernization with westernization. And so any value that we incorporate will be set by the Western standards. So when there's a clash of civilizations, when the Eastern culture meets the Western culture, and when you say hello to each other, you are more likely to handshake rather than do a namaste. If you're going to a business meeting, you're more likely to wear a suit rather than a dhoti or a jodhpuri or a sherwani or any sort of Indian wear. So why are we so quick to give up our own value system, our own cultural norms, and replace them with Western norms, and then call that modernization? So I'm sorry I'm digressing, but I want to mention one fact which is very pertinent. There was an interview of Narayan Murthy. I think he's the CEO of Infosys, yes. And somebody asked him that why is your company so successful? Like, why are Indians so good when they go abroad in IT and all, right? Because I think Sundarji is also in IT field, and a lot of Indian people are in IT, and they do well when they go abroad. It's a fact. We as Indians are the highest contributors as far as an ethnic background goes to the GDP. So Narayan Modi gave a very stupid answer. He said that, see, the Westerners brought us education, and they brought us like the English language, therefore we can communicate well. They brought us these critical thinking skills, therefore we can think well. What a stupid servile answer that is. It's like a completely colonized mind. Uh, I don't even want to get into the fact that he's giving $20 million to this person called Sheldon Pollock to do research on our Shastras in a very Freudian psychoanalytic way. But anyway, even moving apart, the same question was asked to a CEO in Japan. Now, I don't know if many people are aware, but the Japanese corporate culture is extremely humble. The CEO will come to work by train, or he'll ride a bicycle also sometimes. But nowadays, there's not enough scope for that. But they all do not have like chauffeured cars and all. They will live very humbly. They eat food with the lowest rung of employees in the same canteen, and there's no like sense of inferiority, superiority there. So they asked this CEO of Sony at that time that why are you, and this was when the Walkman and other products were being created, right? They were standalone products. Nobody had come up with something so iconic. So they said that how are you guys so good with your designs, and like how are you so cool with whatever you do? So if you see Hitachi, you see Yamaha, they're experts at electronics. Sony, Panasonic. So the CEO said that the women have from a young age, they have been trained to look at details very well. So for example, when they make origami are those paper structures that you make, those paper figurines and different things you can do with paper. So they say that they have a very good attention, a very good eye for details. And so we hire these women to oversee some of our designs, and they try to make it as compact as possible. They try to make it as good as possible. And therefore, it's part of our culture to present perfection to the consumer. And so, while this Narayan Murthy fellow attributed the success of Indians to British people for giving English to us, this guy attributed success to his own country. So, this is something that we really need to incorporate. We need to have a grand narrative, a grand Indian narrative, and a deeper appreciation for our own culture. So, I'm sorry, a big digression, but important. I had to get this out.
No, it's a very important point which you have brought out. Like see, reading values is easy, but applying values in your own life and setting an example for others is totally a different thing and a difficult task. Uh, so I guess this is very important. And yes, Western culture is invading India. The value systems of what we earlier used to have are being eroded, and thanks to the media and the secular minds.
Yes. Karishma ji?
Prashant, Shalini ji is over there.
Shalini ji, you're there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
sorry,
thought you
sorry.
you
When
just
you joined late, I forgot actually. Yeah, please.
that's okay. I can okay, yeah. Hari Om. How values cause conflict. When I have a value structure which I follow in the same manner in which I expect others to follow, my values cause me no conflict. However, when I want others to behave in a certain way, but for my own reasons, I'm not able or willing to behave in that way, I have a problem. When I have a value and something interferes with my expression of that value, I'm in conflict with myself. What interferes with my expression of my general values? Individual situational values linked with some highly desired personal end can interfere with my expression of general values. When the general values have not become for me fully assimilated personal values. The universal value for truth provides a good example of a general standard which frequently is only half assimilated. Can you scroll down, please?
Yeah.
Yeah. Value. Speak truth. I want others to speak truth to me. Universal source. Authorities tell me to speak truth. Obligatory source. Parents say speak truth. Society says speak truth. Religion says speak truth. Assimilation. The value of others' truthfulness is immediately clear. I can see that false information given to me can be inconvenient to harmful to me. My value for the truthfulness of others to me is personal and assimilated. Can you scroll down more?
Yeah.
A little bit more.
Like this?
No, down. I cannot see. Value,
Okay.
cherishment.
No. This is you're here actually.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. The value of my truthfulness is not immediately clear. I do not see what I get out of being truthful. My value for my being truthful is obligatory. My truthfulness obliges my parents. My truthfulness obliges my society. My truthfulness obliges my religious code. Result. I have a split value, one half personal and one half obligatory. The value for money illustrates the development and assimilation of a powerful, personal, situational value.
So
Hari Om.
true. Sundarji, you had alluded to this earlier, right? That you create these split personalities, as Swamiji also says.
Correct, yeah. So
But
Prashant ji,
another
Yeah.
important thing which is mentioned over here is like it's an obligatory source. Like so very often, we hear parents, we hear the authority, we see the laws, we see religion speaking one particular language, like don't do this. But very often we fail to tell others that okay, what should be done. So in case of children, like when they are small, we often tell them don't speak lies, don't hate others, don't do this, but we don't tell them what should be done. So they fail to understand what consequences they will face if they don't speak truth. So that's why they can't assimilate it in themselves. So I guess something should be worked upon over here.
I completely agree. And, of course, if you're a very young child and you're not at the age when you can actually understand, then yeah, some instructions are necessary. But then as you grow up and you reach a certain maturity, then you're no longer looking for do's and don'ts. You're looking for understanding, a deeper sense of like what is really going on. So even if I relate to my own personal background, I'm born in a Hindu Vaishnava family. And when I was in my teenage years, I had a couple of questions about, Ishvara, the Jagat, and I had a very inquiring mind. I was not ready to just accept instructions. I had to be explained some things. So, I inquired from one aunt of mine, and she gave me like a very odd and strange answer that, I'm like, what is this Ishvara? What is Bhagwan? And she's like, you are inside the stomach of Bhagwan, and Bhagwan is this huge person that you're inside. And that totally turned me off. So I'm like, bye bye. I never really, at that point, I kind of mentally gave up the Vedas uh, because I was very uneducated. I had no education about what the Vedas were, and this was my first exposure to a very silly answer that was given to me. And so there are some things I just could not accept, and then therefore I took up to a different set of philosophies, and then again, due to my own punya karma, I came back to Vedanta when I was, I think about 21 years old. So, Unnati is very right about this, that some people may be okay just, following instructions and believing in some things which cannot really be explained. But when you are explain something, then it holds a deeper value for you and it becomes a conviction for you. And when you have a conviction about something, then it need not be enforced anymore. There's no obligation. It's a very de facto natural state of affairs. So yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, very nicely said, Unnatiji. I mean, I like that first line you said. We tell our kids, don't do that, but we don't tell our kids like you should do this. I mean, this is very nice, and I'm gonna imply that from today onward.
Very nice.
Yeah, because, in the formative years, if we don't tell kids what to do, then later, obviously, they are no longer going to they are not going to value this obligation. They will feel, okay, this is just a, lecture which a mom or a dad keeps on, going on and on every time. So they will not value that, okay, what is the reason behind it? Why is my mother telling me not to hit another child? So I guess like when you are young, out of obedience you do it, but yeah, once you gain inner maturity, you no longer have that thing for obedience also, so you move out of that thing, and if it has not internalized, then yeah, you fail to assimilate the value in your life.
Very true. Very true.
So Hariom Prashantji, I just have a hard stop now, so I'll have to leave. I'll join you next week again.
Okay, sure.
Thanks everybody for the discussions. It has been really good, like very enjoyable discussions today.
Thank you so much, Sandarji.
Thank you. Talk to you all.
Hari Om.
Hariom.
Yeah, excellent point, Sunati. That, by the way, in case anybody has questions on how to raise sensible children, please speak to Unnati because she's done a master's in that. So
Yeah, I need a contact number, Prashantji.
yeah, definitely. I'll message it to you. Who's next? Let me check. Karishma ji?
Karishma.
Yeah.
Value. Cherish money. When I was a child of 3 years old, I once picked up a piece of paper. It was green, printed, very colorful. I began, as I did with every paper, to play with it. Mommy said, "No, that is money." "Oh, money," I also said, "money." But I didn't know what is this money. Money, money, money. I kept repeating. Thereafter, wherever I saw that green paper, I knew it was money, which I shouldn't touch, but I didn't know what money is. Then one day when I was a little older, Mommy took me shopping with her to the store. I saw lots of chocolates and jelly beans. I stretched out my hand. Give me jelly beans. The fellow behind the counter raised his eyebrows and looked at Mummy. I wondered why he would not give me any candy when he had so many. Then Mummy opened her purse and pulled out a piece of green paper named money. When she gave that money to the storekeeper, he smiled and handed a packet of jelly beans to me. I didn't understand what had happened, but I was happy with my jelly beans. Next time we went to the store, she gave money and the man gave me chocolates. One day when we were shopping, I wanted a balloon. Out came the money and the balloon was mine. Oh ho! If you give money you get jelly beans, chocolates and even balloons. This is a great discovery for a small child. I had learned that money buys things, all manner of things. Not many people understand the monetary system, but everybody knows that money buys. Later, as I grew up, I came to learn how many things money buys. Houses, cars, even gurus and gods. Nothing buys like money. When I came to know how well money buys, how many things money buys, I come to have a well understood, well assimilated personal value for money.
That's so true, right? This money only, if you, a lot of people, when they count money, that, okay, this is how much a person has, what they are really saying is this is how much I can get in return for this so-called money that I have. So this is what we call inflation, because the same note that you have today, if you have like $100 bill, it might be worth something today. It has a certain value based on how much you can exchange it for, like whether it's chocolates or it's food or just any commodity. The same $100 bill may be worth something very different in the future. So, when the way I really look at money is, as Pujya Samji said, here you don't have a value for money when you're a child, you like no idea what it does. How is it that I can exchange this small green piece of paper for so many different things? And that is ultimately what we are putting a price on. Money is actually its value. What is its value? That's what we are looking at. So the piece of paper itself has no objective value. It has a very transient value. It continues to change over time. And value is only measured by what you can get in return for that, right? So this is one thing that we have. I don't know why I'm going into so many digressions today, but just to mention, like the currency note that we have today was not the original standard. There used to be something used, at least in the Western Hemisphere, not which is called the gold standard, and they use gold as a form of currency of exchange, and the value was more or less constant. You cannot really have inflation when you have gold, right? Because when you create new money, whenever there's an excess of something, whatever you have has lesser and lesser value each year. So if a person is printing counterfeit notes, or if a bank is printing notes, or if the mint in Washington is printing notes, in effect, whatever notes that you have in your pocket are worth lesser and lesser and lesser. So this is a very arbitrary standard we set for ourselves, and I personally believe that we kind of like dug a hole for ourselves, because inflation is going to be a recurring issue. Anyway, coming back to Vedanta itself, as Pujya Swamiji alludes over here that money buys many things, houses, cars, and even gurus. I recall a story that he said that first when Pujya Swamiji came to US, he was not really interested in coming here. Right? It was upon the insistence of a lot of people that please come, we want to study Vedanta, because that is when a sizable population of Indians had settled abroad, and they were all looking for some sort of so-called spiritual guidance, and there was an absence of it. And Pujya Swamiji, though it was not really his preference, he realized that for the greater good of people, I have to take Vedanta to another continent. And so that's why he came to the US in the 70s. And he started teaching over here. But then one person invited him to this very awkward place in California. And there was a stall. I don't know if most of you have been to a fun and fair, right? And you have different stalls, and different people set up booths over there. So one person in the booth will be selling something, or even if you go to a product stall where a lot of people set up booths to sell their products. So here there was a booth of gurus. Can you believe that? There was one guru sitting in this stall, another guru in that stall, another guru in that stall, and they all were basically marketing themselves that, I have studied this and I can teach this, and oh, you want to be my student. And Pujya Sambhaji was like laughing hard. He's like, I am not going to do this. This is a completely messed up way. In fact, I hate to say this, but a lot of our gurus who became famous in US, they went through these stalls to find students, and it's kind of like the highest bidder and stuff, that kind of thing. So, so this was also during the hippie era, when a lot of people chose Hindu gurus. So literally, like, people could choose their gurus that, oh, I like this guy. I think he has a nicer beard than the other one. Or, oh, I like his voice. His voice sounds nicer. You basically walk through a stall of fun and fair, and you select a guru, and then you become that person's student. How foolish is that? But then that was the way, a lot of people chose gurus in the US during the 70s.
I have to
This is
give this example also.
Yeah.
I mean, not just gurus, temples also. I mean, you go to the Anand Bazaar or Diwali Mela here in Dallas, and you'll find all the temple stall also.
Oh, can you tell me more about that? I not aware.
Yeah, it's like here in Dallas. I mean, all these big thing happens like Diwali Mela or Anand Bazaar, this kind of stuff, and you'll find the stall of all the temples also. Like Ram Mandir stall is there, or Hanuman temple stall is there, and like, okay, come to this temple, and I mean now it's too many temples in Dallas,
Yes.
so you'll find all those stalls for temple also. So just you mentioned about gurus,
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, this is happening for temple also. In a way, it's a good thing, but again, it's a marketing, and it
Yeah.
will like for short-term benefit, yes, it's good. I must say, because yes, people do need all these things. But if
Right.
you look at a bigger picture, it causes harm too. That you have to sell your God and temple and gurus.
Yes. Yeah, over here also in Atlanta, like we have, I think about in major temples, we have about 6 to 7 major temples, and I'm very fortunate to like have one just pretty close to my place, like 1 mile away. But I was at a stall recently, and this was recently, as in maybe in October last year, September, and this was for Aim for Seva. So you know, right, that you have this Telugu community, Tamil community, Guju community, and then they have their own kind of like melas coming up. So this was kind of like a Indian pan-Indian mela, and everybody was like setting up stalls in order to market their not, I won't say product, well, in some cases product also, because there were like these face creams and all that were being sold. But we were trying to advertise Aim for Seva, which is an organization, not an organization, it's a movement where you contribute to the well-being of orphan students in India, and this is initiated by Pujya Swamiji. So in that sense, it's very tolerable, and it got a lot of impact. We collected, I think, about $700-800 in a day, so that was cool. But I feel that what Pujya Swamiji described about the gurus marketing themselves, that I am a guru and I'm looking for students, that to me is very scary, because the guru has become a commodity. He's become like a thing that you can purchase, or a thing that you can basically just advertise to people, and then people pick a guru. So it defies my sense of value, I guess, for sure. Another thing is that so there's a temple here called IAC, it's like Indian American Cultural Association or whatever. And once my parents and I just went, because there was supposed to be a play, and this was during Christmas week. So I did not expect it, but they were basically doing a play on the birth of Jesus. The whole story of the three men who come to look at Jesus, and like the Mother Mary is there, and like the child Jesus is there, and the star is moving on the top and stuff. So they were like recreating this play, and I asked the Pandit, the pujari who works there. I said that why are you guys catering to Christianity? This is a Hindu mandir. And he said that, how else do we get people? Many Americans want to get interested, and the temple management doesn't, know what to do. And the Pandit was actually very disappointed himself, because it's something he didn't want to do. But he's there as an employee, which is sad, right? But the temple authorities, the president of the temple, the chairman and all, they treat the Pandits and Pujaris as simple employees, that you do what I tell you and I'll give you your monthly income or whatever. So they give the Pandits an apartment to stay in, and they give some kind of a stipend. I don't know, like maybe $1,000 or so, $1,400 a month. and then they are basically supposed to do everything that these people say. So a lot of people who come to the US, and especially when they've made it big somehow in terms of their income, they've set up their businesses and all, and then when they become old, they don't know what to do with their life. I mean, seriously, at least in the temples around here, that's what I've seen. Like they don't have direction, and so suddenly they feel that, oh, let me do something for my community, and then they'll go and build a temple. They'll spend like millions of dollars for it, and then they have no idea about dharma. They have no idea about our traditions. They have no idea about any parampara, and so they are completely lost. And so then they think Christianity is the same as Islam is the same as Hinduism is the same, and this and that, and so they mix everything up. And that is how I see many temples over here. And there is so much politics going on in our temples, like, anyway, that's a I don't want to bore people now, but yeah, I completely agree with Shalini that the scenario here is not very comfortable. So I think we should wrap up for today, and then maybe we can have like post broadcast discussion. So I'm just gonna like cut off the broadcast now. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.